Earlier this year, we were honoured in the PGA of Europe when John Jacobs accepted our invitation to become our president. It is now my very pleasant duty to introduce the new president of the PGA of Europe, Mr. John Jacobs. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, could I, in terms of being the president of the PGA of Europe, it is a tremendous honour which I really I'm thrilled about. The best thing of all, of course, for me is that when I come and I see so many old friends, so it's wonderful for me to be the president. And now I'm going to tell you all the things that I've been saying for about the last 50 years. For me, golf is what the ball does. Whether it's the big muscles or the small muscles, the only thing that the ball is going to respond to is the head of the golf club. And when you're playing golf, the whole effort we all make, I think I'll amble over here, is to get the club to meet the ball correctly. And my whole life has been spent, I feel, in putting people in their best position to get the best possible impact. Now, when you play golf, you've got to manage somehow to get that club to meet the ball, with the club face square. That's if you want to hit a straight shot. It can be closed, open, or square. You would also want the club to be swinging at impact in the direction of the target, not in to out, not out to in. Also, you've got to have the correct angle of attack. The club swings up, it swings down, swings up again. That would be particularly steep. This would be much more shallow. In terms of the angle of attack, I think it's easy to say the bottom of the swing has got to coincide with the golf ball. If you get the club face closed, the ball will tend to go to the left. You'll automatically swing in to out, and if you do, the bottom of the arc goes too far behind the ball. If you hit it with the club face open, ball goes to the right, automatically you swing across here, the bottom of the arc goes too far forward. So everything we do is to try to get that to meet the ball correctly. Now, how that is achieved will vary tremendously on the very point that Donato was making. But to me, the best possible chance of getting the club to meet the ball correctly is to address correctly. Now, the address position is not there just for good form. It has a direct consequence of the impact. We don't hold the golf club in a particular way because we golf professionals say so. We hold it in a particular way so that when you've swung the club all the way to the top and all the way back down again, it arrives as you would wish it to, square if you want a straight shot. It's got to arrive at speed. So the first thing, the grip. Now, that does not mean to say we all have to hold the club the same way, but what we do have to do is to hold it in a way that is going to apply the club face correctly to the ball. In terms of swinging the club in the right direction, you would need to put the club in the correct direction with the correct loft on it. What have I got here? 9-iron. It's usual for me to pick something easy. I make sure I never bring a 2 or 3 iron or a 1 iron with me. You know, somebody might ask me to hit it. But you've got to aim the club in the right direction. The aim of the golf club will definitely position the ball in the correct position. If you aim, and you'll be standing open because you'll be aiming with both eyes, the aim of the club will position the ball relative to the feet. The feet will go into position, and then you've got to square up and sit up. Now, those things are all relevant to the swing being in the right direction. This would be a wonderful aim, but a dreadful stance. Then somebody like me comes along, quick lesson there, and then 10 minutes later, you see the person standing like this. This is a marvelous stance, but it's a dreadful aim. You have to have the two things correct, the club on target, the body parallel. That's giving you the best chance of swinging the club through the ball in the right direction. Now, the right angle of attack. Most important to get the correct posture, bearing in mind with the ball to the side of you, the arc of the golf swing is going to be from inside to straight through to inside again. The arc is going to be from in there, straight through and inside again. Get you coming back, actually. So you have to also take up the correct posture. So you're trying to put that club into the ball, square, straight, and at the right angle of attack. Now, to achieve that, the grip, the aim, the stance, the posture. Now, it's very easy to remember GASP, isn't it? Grip, aim, stance, posture. Now, if you get those things wrong, then the whole pack of cards would go wrong. All those lovely swings we've just seen there, we were not able to see where they were setting up for. If I do a video with people, I'd very often put a golf ball only sort of 8 feet in front of the camera so that you could see whether the setup was correct or not. So, the swing itself conditioned completely by the position of the ball relative to the player. The ball is to the side and it's on the ground. The fact it's to the side, the arc will be from in to in. That's why it's so important to take up the correct posture whereby the body will move this way. I often say, keep your head down. That's kept me in business for 50 years. You know, I think people smell it, they don't hit it. You know, they stick the nut right over the top of the ball. That goes a bit too steep, that would hit the ground. Nobody enjoys that very much. So people leap away from it, and some well-meaning member of the four ball says, hey, your head was up. So they stick it down a bit further, and they leap away a bit more. So having the back in the correct position makes it very easy to move the body to make room for the correct arc. But the ball is not only to the side, the ball is on the ground. So as we turn, we swing the club up and down. And that, for me, is timing. Numbers of people who come to me and say, John, you have to help me because I've lost my timing. I think one needs to explain exactly what is timing in terms of the golf swing. It is marrying, moving the body and swinging the club with the hands and arms. And you know, the only thing that ball is going to respond to is not the big muscles or the small muscles. It's only going to respond to this. And therefore, everything you do, and I would say the only object of the golf swing is to get the correct impact. How that is achieved is of no account as long as you can make it repetitive. But the starting position, I feel I've spent my life putting in people in the correct position for them. I don't put everybody in the same position. Name dropping, a Jack Nicklaus. Back of his neck parallel to the ground 25 years ago, everybody copying him. He's trying to change it, but everybody was copying him because he's a winner. To my mind, Jack won in spite of his golf swing. He doesn't mind me saying that because he knows I'm paying him a compliment, really. That's how good he was. But I would say anybody who plays the game really well, the ball to the side, a tendency to draw the ball, the very fact that the ball is to the side, the standard shot should be a little draw. Good players, people who start young enough, tend to draw the ball, and if they get too close, they draw it too much. But we are going to spend our lives, a lot of you, teaching handicap golfers, whereby they would need to stand more close to get at the ball from the inside. So we don't tell everybody the same thing, and we don't put everybody in the same starting position. There is a relationship between the grip and the stance. If you want to stop people slicing, you would need to close the body, and that would strengthen the grip. That would make it easier to get from in to straight. But I would stress again the practicalities of teaching golf would be diagnosis, explanation, correction. And if we come to the practicalities, the first morning, I still love teaching golf in the sense that I like to see a new pupil, somebody I've not met before, because it's a new experience for me. I can't really say that I enjoy very much in one's mid-70s supervising the practice. When I've given the lesson, forgive me, I know I'm right because they've hit better shots, but then that needs to be repeated and repeated and repeated to get the desired result. That, at my age, when you're getting very senile anyway, becomes a bit of a bore. So a new pupil, I love seeing a new pupil. And you know, when you get a new pupil, you would pass the time of day. You would ask their handicap. You would absolutely make sure you put them at their ease. You would ask them what is the strength of their game, what is the weakness of their game. And you would get a report before you start even. You've got to, some people would respond to a sense of humor, others you'd be treated more gently, others you'd have to be more authoritative. So there's a real sense of dealing with a person, so much better than machines and things, much, much more enjoyable. We're in a marvelous profession. And then I would want to see that pupil, I would want to look from there and see them hit shots in this direction. I'm talking about remedial practice, not teaching beginners particularly. And I would see where they're aiming, where they're standing, and I would see the swing path. And if you see the swing path and you see where the ball goes, you would know automatically the position of the club face. You don't have to be a genius to appreciate if you swing across here and the ball finishes over there, that the club face is open at impact. And in spite of what I've said in terms of the setup, there's no fear in a practice swing. It's very easy to say we should aim the club, we should stand correctly, we should hold it correctly. That is absolutely true, and it's the basis of what we do. But on the other hand, when you get a pupil in front of you, that pupil will probably know that. But if he's sliced for the last 5 years of his life with a driver, and there's an out of bounds on the first tee on the right, he won't be able to stand like that at all. He'll be able to make a wonderful practice swing, and he'll boast what a wonderful practice swing he has, because he'd feel there's no fear at all. There's no ball to go over that out of bounds. I mean, numbers of people who say to me they've got a great practice swing, to which I would say, well, you've no proof, have you? Because there's no club face in a practice swing. So you've got to immediately, if I've got people swinging across there because they've sliced forever, I'll do something which, if they're going to swing across here, at least I'll make the ball go across there as opposed to over here. To me, the club face is by far the most important ingredient. Anything that bends, slice or hook, it is very, very difficult to get people to set up correctly in spite of them believing what you say. It's very difficult. If someone is hooking a lot, they will automatically be hitting from here. I will certainly make the ball go over there somehow. Change of grip, a change of technique. And as long as when they swing in this direction, it goes over there, you've got that pupil working for you immediately, because he gets fed up of that side and everything will fall into position and you'll be able to get a clearance through here. Equally, if it's this one and they're standing across there, as long as you turn a slice into a pull, you've got them working for themselves. So the practical business of teaching, and I think sometimes these conferences we aim too much at the great players. We've just seen a lot of great players. But I've spent my life teaching, well, I suppose the last 30 years of my life I've spent much more in teaching teachers. I'm very proud of the fact that we had 20,000 pupils through our schools in America last year. And those people there that teach golf, I'm so thrilled with them because they all do it the same way and they get results. The only measurement of a good golf lesson is, does the person hit the ball any better when you finish with them? Not can they dissertate about the golf swing better. And for me, I'll just repeat it once more, the business of playing golf for me is getting the correct impact. I didn't come into golf to be a teacher. I'm quite sure a lot of you must feel the same. I wanted to be the best player there ever was. As a child, born in a golf club of a golf professional, it was Bobby Jones in my day. You know, I was wanting to be a Bobby Jones and then a Henry Cotton and so on. I suppose when I started to play as a professional, I was big, strong, and it wasn't the length of the course, it was the width of the golf course that bothered me most, either over there or over here. So I quickly, everything I say when I'm teaching people arises out of me trying to play. I realized that golf for me was ball control, and I wasn't going to be able to control that ball unless I could control the club. So I worked from the ball to the club to me in that direction. What does the ball do? Therefore, what must the club do? And finally, what I do. Now, I suppose most other people would start at this end. I certainly start ball flight laws for me are absolutely crucial. I tell you in all honesty, I have started the odd golf school when I've asked someone I've never met to hit shots, and I've walked 20 yards in front, I have my own staff on the tee, and I've watched the ball fly, and I've told the person on the tee, would you get him or her to do so and so, and we've got better shots straight away, because the ball cannot cheat, the ball can't lie. Now, the ball can only bend to the left or the right, it can only start to the left or to the right, and it can only fly too high or too low. And the traps that we fall into I say you must, in terms of the swing, assuming the correct setup, the body turns and the club swings up and down. I would describe the golf swing is upright on an in-to-in arc because the body's out of the way. I remember when I first was on the Golf Digest table, of so-called experts, 1969, 70, 71, and I'm thrilled to meet some of our American friends, and I'm looking forward to listening to them tomorrow. But at that time, America, and Chuck, you'll remember this, they said, gee, that's that British guy who teaches a flat swing. Now, that upset me a bit at the time, I must say, because Jack Nicklaus, the best, was rocking his shoulders tremendously. Square to square was the popular thing. And I was stressing that you needed a posture whereby the back turned, but the club swung up and down, and therefore the arc was upright, but upright in to in, as opposed to being too straight. And I would say there is some tilt in the turn because of the posture of the body, but the feel is of turning away. There is a tilt because of the posture, but it's not like that. And so if we get the club swinging up very well, but the body going this way, the straighter the swing, the more inaccurate you're going to be. It's one of the difficulties of playing golf. We human beings, we're bound to think that the straighter we swing, the straighter we will hit it. But if you do that, the body tends to get in the way, which holds the club open in the hitting area. Just on the impact, everything stops, but the club doesn't stop. So you mix a push fade with a quick hook. It's a very difficult game to play if you play that way. Equally, if you turn correctly, but you don't swing the club up, and the club gets too wound here, from the top of the backswing here, you can either hit early too much from the inside, very much into out, or from this position you use the body and come over the top. I would stress again, in terms of technique, I wouldn't go further than turn and swing the club up, turn as you swing it down. That's as much detail as I want to go into. Whether you set early or whether it's much more delayed, all those things are very much individual things. But it's terribly, terribly important you start from a position that the body can move this way at the same time that you swing the club up and down. Certain things, as I say, have kept me in business for a long time. Keep your head down. Hit late. You know, for me, the backswing, you move and you set the club correctly. There are two reasons for the correct backswing. You have to turn in a way that you will turn through, because if you don't turn through, you'll get independent hand action there. So at the top of the backswing, that club has got to be in the correct plane and direction, which will just catch the grass in the downswing. Not will go into it, not won't hit the floor at all. And therefore, if you get that in the right position, use it, swing it down. So many times I see people from the top of the backswing, not so much now, but years ago, whatever else I do, I must not swing the club down. A lot of everything but the golf club. Having got the club in the right position, swing it down at the same time as you turn through. You want nothing independent. Correct dress, turn and pop it up. From there, swing it down as you turn through. As I say, no more detail than that. I suppose 7 or 8 years ago, I was invited to go to the tour school, you know, early January, and my immediate reaction was, no, it's a different generation. And then I suddenly realized, yes, I wanted to, because at that time, Nick Faldo, David Ledbetter were being hugely successful, so they were absolutely correct, both of them. But that was so detailed. That was very correct for Nick Faldo, David Ledbetter. David wouldn't teach Nick Price the same way as he teaches Nick Faldo. And I suddenly thought, no, I'd like to go there, because playing golf is terribly difficult. You should watch me play now. I'm the living proof of how difficult golf is. Hitting balls is relatively easy. And I would say for most of us, the business of hitting golf balls, the easier and the simpler, I think that is the easy part. Playing golf is so difficult. You know, you get a bad bounce. You take the wrong half club, you drop shots, and then it becomes a mental thing. And I think, I know that if I had my chance to come again, I would seek help from the psychologist, from the sports psychologist, which I'm so happy we have some here. because nothing, and if my wife was here, well, she wouldn't mind me saying this, she's heard it often enough, not even my wife has annoyed me as much as my bad golf. Tom, don't tell her I said that, will you? You know, when you're 5 under par and you've 2 holes to go and you knock it out of bounds, or the things that have happened to all of us. This is where I've just finished, forgive me, a 9th book, which is about the best players of the 20th century. And I come down on Jack Nicklaus having been the best golfer of the 20th century. And I stress golfer because Jack technically, and he's won in spite of his golf swing for the most part. Technically, would you say Byron Nelson or Ben Hogan or Henry Cotton in terms of technique? But a golfer is someone who can play the next shot, whoever. And I think when we're teaching, I feel that I'm dealing with less than 50% of the game. I think it's terribly easy to get people to set up correctly and go through diagnosis. I've done that. I know immediately what I want to say to this person. And then it's explanation. And the explanation has to be good. And it's usually accompanied by demonstration. I feel personally now that I definitely am over the hill to some extent in that I cannot demonstrate as well as I used to. And it's a very, very important part of teaching. I'm so pleased that Tom is following me. And I noticed it's about demonstration, what he's going to talk about. He's a wonderful demonstrator himself, but it is very much part of teaching. You have to diagnose, and then you have to explain to that pupil with demonstration what they're doing wrong, what is required to make it better, and then you come to the correction. Now, the correction has got to be doable. And I would say again, the correction for me would 99 times out of 100, putting that person in a different position. I'm talking about the handicapped club golfer and even to the Alathabels, if you like. If there's something wrong, you've got to certainly make sure that they're in the best position to do what you want them to do, because you cannot ask anyone to do more than 2 things during the golf swing, and that's on a practice ground, because you've got to get that down to 1 on the golf course. I'm talking about after you've been in the right position. And I would hate, as I say at golf schools sometimes, don't go around the golf course taking 10 minutes to address the ball, otherwise they'll never have us back again. You know, you've got to learn how to address it, but not spend all day. But it's hold it correctly, aim it correctly, and when you aim, you're aiming with both eyes so the body is particularly open. I shall never forget some friends here from Germany, when I first taught some German groups, which I've been doing for ages, and the first time I taught them, the vast majority of them stood right across it and then went this way and so on. And I sort of spent the time putting them in position. I saw them a year later, and they all came up to the address position, put the shoulders in position, aimed 100 yards to the right, which made a super backswing, but a very bad luck downswing. So it's got to be right on both counts. Grip, aim the club, stand square to the club, and take up the correct posture. From there, you turn, you swing it up, you turn, you swing it down. I would say too, pitching, chipping. You address the ball relative to the shot you're trying to play. A chip shot is a low shot, so the club will stay relatively close to the ground. A pitch shot is much steeper. If you get a golf swing like this, you'll get a golf ball like that. If you keep it close to the ground, you'll hit it close to the ground. But it's a question of addressing. You would stand open because you're only with the feet like that, not the body across, to make sure you can get through in the right direction. A little bit higher shot, a little higher shot, a little higher shot, a low shot. The arc is from in to straight, particularly these days when you can get golf clubs with tremendous amounts of loft. I was interested reading, I think it was Tom Watson. See, I warned you that I would lose it in mid-sentence. You'll all be old one day, I promise you. If you're lucky, you will, anyway. Tom was carrying 3 wedges. And I think, Jacobs, you were ahead of your time. Because I carried 3 wedges when I was playing golf in the 50s. Because I wanted the closer grading at that end of the game. And mind you, we played with a small ball then, so I never took a 1-iron or a 2-iron. I took a 3-iron because if I missed the green with a 3-iron, I could turn it into a 2-iron anyway. But I didn't want to be hitting half shots and three-quarter shots until it was absolutely impossible not to. So I had a strong wedge, a weak wedge, and a sand wedge. And I would say with the extra lofted club now, for the most part, you can still just hit from inside. It's upright, yes, from inside to straight through. You don't have to hit across here very often with the face open, not with a modern club and ball. Again, the setup would be a different weight distribution, hands further forward, everything to suit the impact. A bunker shot, you would know you want a bunker shot by the green. You want a short, high shot, well, you better turn the club into a 12-iron then, hadn't you? Not a 10-iron, a 12-iron. You want it short and high. So it's a weaker club. You put the body across here, so you've set up for an out to in stroke, which is going to get to the bottom of the ball, as opposed to from in to straight would hit it too thin, with the club face open. Every shot you play, you've driven into the rough. The rough's about that deep, and the ball's at the bottom of that. You would address relative to playing that shot. If you can't reach the green, you would probably take an 8-iron, and you'd turn that 8-iron into about a 6-iron by putting the ball a long way back and making a very steep downward blow, and the ball wouldn't fly out pretty low and would roll a very long way. On the other hand, you're just within range. You take a 6-iron. Shall we say you're 120 yards, 6-iron, put the club very lofted, stand across and hit down and across. Again, it's got to be steep. So the explanation has got to be there, and the explanation will certainly come back to you better address it this way if you want to get that sort of a contact. One of the wonderful things I think about this week is the get-together we're going to all have at the end of the day. And I would beg all of you, don't hold back. Obviously, there's no need to be rude if you disagree with us, but on the other hand, there isn't anybody coming on here, I'm sure, who's going to be upset if you say, well, I don't agree with that, or just speak up, don't hold back. What makes me say that now? Because I want to switch my brain off right now and ask for some questions for you, because I feel I've covered a lot of ground there, but that's about as much as I would ever say. In terms of putting, just to mention putting. Now, we've got some genius putters here. Now, Harold Thrush, God bless him, he once got me to putt half decently down in, where was that? Where was that, Harold? San Roque, that's it. Now, putting, what do you want out of putting? A, you've got to see the line, and the business of putting is to be able to roll that ball along the line at the right speed. I come again to, what do you want the ball to do? Now, what must the putter do? It must arrive swinging that club through the ball in the right direction with the face square and the right speed. That's the problem of putting. Then you come to, what do? You might be somebody who does it with the wrists, with the arms, with the shoulders. That is of no account whatsoever. The popular one at the moment, as I'm sure you're all seeing, is most people are doing it with the shoulders. I think that's a little related to the speed of the modern green. But don't get away from, putting is getting to the ball to roll the right direction, which means the path and the face have got to be correct at impact at the right speed. What you manage to do with, people say to me, what do you putt with? Do you putt with your... I say, well, I putt with a putter, personally. You know what I mean? It's... well, it's... But, I mean, what else? But most people would say, do you putt with your shoulders, or do you putt with your hands, or do you... Oh, forgive me, I use the putter. But so, for me, and I would... It sounds awful, but I would boast that I reckon I can get most people to hit good shots on a practice ground in quick time, like I'm sure a lot of you can. A night's sleep, and of course habit, is a much more difficult thing to change. That's where continuity of advice and continuity of the same message is vitally important if you're going to get real changes. What is so thrilling for me to see now, and I played with a couple of boys just 3 days ago, 16, 17, and I see so many wonderful young players here in Spain at 14, 15, 16 with wonderful techniques. We did not have that. When I started, it was all trial and error, and everything I say to you arose out of me trying to play the game. But I reckon you can get anyone to hit good shots on a practice ground pretty quickly. But you've got to convince people it's worth persevering with this, because they will scream, "Gee, John, that's a lot better, but it's uncomfortable." And I would very often say, well, the choice is yours. Get comfortable and go on slicing, or be a little uncomfortable and hit it straighter. Again, if you persevere, it will become comfortable. Now, come on, ask me. Somebody must be dying to ask me a question. Please ask me a question. Shout. How do you decide whether a player should play left-handed or right-handed? I'm so thrilled to have that particular question, because down, not now, but I promise you, over many, many years, if a child started to play golf left-handed, somebody, very often a golf professional in those days, said, no, golf's a left-arm game, and therefore you need to play right-handed with the left arm dominating, added to which you get a much better choice of golf clubs, and golf courses are laid out for right-handers. All the sort of obscure, unintelligent, no common sense reasons for making somebody who wanted to play golf left-handed, right-handed. And I would say, whatever a child or whatever wants to do it naturally, if I teach a left-hander, I promise you I hit some golf balls left-handed. I try to remember to address it, shift the left side out of the way, swing the club down at the same time as I turn the right side out of the way. It's just a back to front job, is getting the right side out of the way, and so on. So how do I decide? I would simply say to the pupil, which do you prefer? Which feels most natural? Which do you do best? And I would certainly not make somebody play right-handed who wanted to play left-handed. Our national game, cricket, and we're playing ever so well in South Africa at the moment, but we have had down the years, I'm not sure at the moment, we've had no end of wonderful left-handed bats. Now, happily at cricket, all those natural left-handers weren't made to play golf right-handed, which I'm quite sure when I first built driving ranges and golf centres in Britain, middle 60s, in a 30-bay driving range, we only needed 3 left-handed bays. Happily, that's totally different now. You need about a third, well, at least a quarter of left-handed bays now, because people are not being made to play against their natural. Does that answer your question or not? Coming right to it, whatever they want to do, depending upon which feels the best for them, which do they do best? But you've answered the question. It felt much better left-handed. I think you're just confirming exactly what I'm saying. He was left-handed and was advised to play right-handed because that advice usually goes with golf is a left-arm game. Golf is not a left-arm game. Golf is a club head game. And you've got 2 hands on the club. Now, when I used to play, I won't say well, but not too badly for a few years, I would play for 3 months very conscious of my left-handed arm. And then I'd play for the next 2 or 3 very conscious of the right-handed arm. And I personally am hugely right-handed. But the ball isn't the least bit worried as to which hand it's bothered about this. I hope I've answered your question. Behind you. Video to me is of use, but I'm nervous that if it's used wrongly. For instance, video is, shall we say I've got someone swinging, they come for less, and they swing tremendously flat. And I would say to that person, and they'd say, well, I know I'm swinging flat, but I need to get my hands high. So, well, stop worrying about that. Would you put the club in the right direction? And I promise you, you will not swing flat. There is a relationship between the direction of the golf club and the plane of the golf club. So I would explain, and with video, they'd have a few practice swings, and I would say, there's a tree in the distance there. Don't swing down until you feel you've got that club on the tree. You'll be looking at the ball, but don't swing down until you've got the club shaft pointing at the tree. And then have a few practice swings, and we'd video it and show them how marvelous it was. Then they'd hit a couple of balls, and it would go straight back over here again. And video is ever so useful to explain to that person the degree of exaggeration that person would have to feel to change it with the ball. The times on a practice ground I find myself saying, look, I don't mind you missing. I'll take the blame if you miss it. But I don't want you to do the same thing over and over again. I want, if that person still lays it off over there, I would say, well, would you please try and point it, and I point at some tree over there. Would you please try and point it over there, which usually gets them halfway. So video does have its uses, but the big problem for me is with video, it does not show the club face at impact. Now, most of you would know that with a driver, you only have to be 4 degrees off square and you miss the fairway. And too often I've seen people be videoed and be doing something like that, we'll say, and they get huddled behind the video. You can see you're doing this, that, and the other, but you can't see the club face. If somebody is doing that badly enough, that for me is a club face mistake, not a swing path mistake. It's become a swing path mistake. If you then get somebody swinging like that to hit the ball down the path of the swing, then they will soon change the swing path. So where video falls down, to some extent, it does have its uses. I was at the trade show quite recently, and there was a group of professionals. We were watching, I see they've got a stand here. What's the name of the company that have got videos of all the great players? And someone was talking about Chenverell Athabel and how he reverse pivoted, you see. And so I said, have you got one of Ben Hogan? And they had one of Ben Hogan, and it was wonderful. Now, Ben Hogan was flat and rounded, but in actual fact, he cupped the left wrist at the top of the backswing, and I have an article at home, I wish I'd have brought it with me, in which he writes, the secret of golf is cupping the left wrist. And it changed from being a closed to an open and a flat to being upright. But Ben Hogan, therefore, was too rounded and would, normally speaking, would be too shallow into the ball. So Ben Hogan left a lot of weight on his left side in the backswing, and he would, if he had stayed neutral or even moved across here, that would have ruined the balance. And therefore, when you teach people, it depends what they do. A lot of great players move to the right. That would have been fatal for Ben Hogan. Around about 1950, again, Golf Digest, they put the leading 50 money winners one by one here with a graph behind. 47 moved to the right in the backswing, 3 kept still. Nobody went this way. Now, Hogan didn't move that way, but I tell you what, he left a lot of weight on his left side. And in terms of striking, any of you, well, you're not old enough to have seen him, but he was pretty hot, I promise you. So, now what was the question? I've forgotten now. see. What was the question? Yeah, fine. Well, I hope that video, again, you could look at a video of Ben Hogan, and I promise you, you'll see what I've just seen. It's a balance. I'm trying to think of the name, a lovely friend of mine, and he's spoken very kindly of me in that particular book, which always cheers you, I must say. And he said, when he watched me, he worked in my golf schools for a while, Hank Haney. Hank, you know, who's taught last year's Master Golf and Open champion. God bless you. You're catching on now. You're helping me out, Mark Amira. He said, watching me, as long as it even numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8, and going down a line of people, I didn't try and get everybody to swing in an orthodox fashion. I made sure that whatever they were doing was balanced with the easiest possible way to improve impact. Everything you do in terms of teaching, in terms of playing this game, is what the ball does, and that is to do with what the club is doing when it hits it. You will get the best possible results if you get an address position that takes into account the failings or the particular foibles of a particular player. How am I doing for time? Oh, can keep going for another 20 minutes, can't we? Got more questions, please? Interlock or overlapping, I don't mind at all. Interlock, overlapping, double-handed. What it must do is make that particular person arrive with the club face under control at speed. I think the shape of the hands is awfully important. Whether it's overlap, interlock, double-handed, the angle of the hands is terribly important. For instance, 50 years ago, I had what would be described as a particularly weak grip, with both V's very much up to the chin. If I held it like that now, I hit an even shorter slice than I do holding it much further over here. So that, again, the grip that a lot of the great players, we've gone through, again, I suppose, when you've been around an awful long time, you do recognize the different phases. In the 1950s, 60s, and at that time, America was way ahead of the rest of the world in terms of performance, and most of their best players held the club in a very weak position, both V's here, with a very straight left wrist at the top of the backswing, which is a balance. Definitely in the last 10 years, there's been a move away from that. A stronger grip with more life at the top of the backswing. But whatever it is, it's got to match the individual. And I would say I don't mind any of those. I think most ladies, most children, I would advise to use all the fingers and all the hand of both hands. But I don't worry too much about interlock overlap. I do worry about the position of the hands there. I think it's best described if I say, when you take hold of the golf club, you should be holding it more or less in your impact position. If I hit the ball straight with my hands in that position, then I better put them there. If I started with my hands here, but I say that's where they are at impact, you can see what's happened down there. And it's a very easy way of explaining that to a pupil. Starting beginners, I wouldn't start by teaching a beginner the grip, because it's an appalling thing to be starting a new game and the guy wants you to hold it in this terribly uncomfortable way. It's boring, and all they want to do is to get swishing away and getting the ball in the air. So I would certainly hit one or two shots myself and show that if I hold it like that, that ball is going to go straight out to the right because that is my impact position. And I'd show a quick hook as well. And therefore I'm showing the person the importance of the grip before I show them how to hold the club. And I think that is terribly important. And if you're starting beginners, please don't start straight in on the grip in terms of you better hold it. Do demonstrate first. Now, there are all sorts of facets to the grip. Pressure. I mean, Gary used to separate his hands at the top and get a lot of backlash from the top, therefore he cast it, and that was the reason for his hook. And I certainly remember, and I've done it with lots of other people, put a piece of grass on the left thumb, and that grass has got to stay there, as opposed to it falling out here. And if the hands stay together, you get much wider through there, you get much less independent hand action. The longer the thumb, I find if you hold the club with the left thumb much longer, your left forearm is much tighter, the greatest anti-hook of all, a long left thumb. When I used to go to Open Championships in the 60s and 70s, the numbers of really good players who started to hook the ball under pressure, they got that a little bit quicker, a little bit nervous about it. And I would simply lengthen the left thumb, and I said, 2 weeks after the Open, you'll probably need to go back to where you were. So there are lots of different little angles about the grip. Some people wouldn't know what I was talking about. A Neil Coles or Christy O'Connor, they just held it like that in the first place and they haven't had all the problems. They just go on playing the same day in and day out. I'm so envious of them because I always had to work at it. I played wonderfully well for about 2 weeks a year at the height of my playing career, such as it was. I wasn't bad the other 50 weeks, but I was having to work like Billy on doing things. The grip was, I can remember hooking the ball badly, and in the winter, if anyone had watched me in the winters in the 1950s, and I reckon I was teaching golf from 9 till 6 every day, 6 days a week, but before 9 and after 6, I would be hitting golf balls with a particularly weak grip, and anybody watching me would have thought I was a 6 handicap fader. And that was all right because when the season started, I was fine until about the middle of the season, by which time they'd crept over here again and I might as well have stayed at home for the last part of the season. So you've got to know your own golf. There's a lot one could say, but when you're teaching people, you're going to be standing here watching somebody hitting there. you will see, I'm looking at the grip. I never look straight at a grip. I no more would look there, teaching a beginner, yes. Because if I look there, I'm only looking to see if it's orthodox. I'm not in the least bit interested in whether it's orthodox. Is it doing the job? Looking from here, I can see the path of the swing. And if the ball is not going down the path of the swing, I would very often walk round there and have a look at the grip. But you see, the grip is not the only control of the club face. The club face, assuming the grip is all right, you can have the wrong body action and the club face will go wrong if you get too far around here. When people sliced in the 1930s, forgive me, 1940s, I would say the vast majority were a figure of 8 in and over the top. If you look at pictures of those golfers who played in those days, going back to the gutty ball, the ball had to be got in there. So most people had long, relatively flat swings with a lot of wrist action. The change of ball, the change of shaft, everything became shorter and stronger. But in terms of the swing, if you get too much round here and stay there, you will hook like below. If you get too much round here and unwind it, then you slice and pull from there. So the action you use sometimes is the thing which is affecting the club face. The grip is the direct control of the club face, but it's not the only control. As we all know, there are golfers all over the world with the biggest, I was going to say hookers grips. I can say that in Europe, actually. I once said that on the air in America, blimey. What's this goddamn limey doing talking about hookers on the air? Came straight through the earphones. But there are a lot of people holding the club like that with a real hooking type grip, still slicing like billiard because of the action. So when you're diagnosing, you're looking from here, why is that person slicing a lot? If the swing looks fairly orthodox, then you'd look around there and have a look at the grip, seeing whether it is the grip. But if you're just looking from here, you would be looking to see whether it's, if it's hugely out, well, of course, that would shout something anyway. There's a lot to be said in the grip, but far away.
How do you teach indoor to people, if you have to teach indoor?
Teaching indoors can be terribly dangerous. These days, of course, there's so much you can measure the impact with a lot of the best indoor. It's pretty universal all over the world now. You can hit balls indoors and you can get a readout straight away of the face and the swing path, so you know what the ball was doing, usually onto a screen. But years and years ago, we just hit balls into nets in the winter when the weather was horrible in Britain. And a lot of the time, people were just practicing a hook for about 3 months during the winter. Felt wonderful. Anything in the middle of the club hit the net, and it felt marvelous. But the trouble is, when they went out in the fresh air, everything was going over there. One of my great friends, he used to go skiing at Crown every winter. He was a scratch golfer. He went there for 3 weeks every winter, and of course, there were a lot of golf schools in Crown in those days. And being mad keen, he hit golf balls every night into these nets. He came back and he was hooking like below every year he came back. So it's important to know what the ball is doing. And as I said, usually these days there are means of measuring the impact. Otherwise it can be dangerous. But it's a good, beginners, yes, people that you're just trying to get a decent sort of movement. Teaching beginners, I wouldn't want a beginner to swing the club in isolation of the target. I think Donato touched upon it. I wouldn't dream of saying go back 12 inches, not 11 or 13 inches, transfer 2/3 of the weight onto the inside of the right foot, keep the right over the left arm, all that stuff. I would say to a beginner, once you've put them in the right position, I'd say, you see that target down there, a flag or a tree or something, I want you to move this and point the club at that tree. And you've got a backswing in moments. Now, you've then got to spend time to get the left arm long enough to give you the correct width behind the ball. I think people have forgotten, you know, when they talk about the left arm has got to be reasonably straight to keep this side of the swing wide enough to swing through, as opposed to swinging down too steep. That's the only reason for the left arm. It's very much part of the radius of the golf swing. But as I said, teaching total beginners, I would only give them 2 things to do in the backswing. Having put them in the right position, I would say, take that shoulder straight over there, and at the same time, would you please point the club where you'd like the ball to go? Now, from there, you've got to get back to the full radius. In other words, the shaft. And honestly, beginners, they miss most of the shots their first lesson. But if you tee the ball up for them and tell them to do those couple of things, I promise you they will hit a few superb golf shots the first morning. Now, that's what teaching's about. That's what is getting a golfer who's going to get enthralled by the game of golf, as opposed to fed up with it. I mean, people who give up golf give it up in the first year that they're trying to play because it's a fairly miserable business. Most of you would be like me. I played golf from the day I could stand up. And as I say, I used to whack it in all directions, but at least I could hit it because, again, I was so lucky in that I saw Henry Cotton in 1938. And from there on, every time I played golf, I was Henry Cotton. Sent like a fortnight later, he was beating me 5-4 in the final of the British PGA, the Penfold tournament. He was still my hero. He was still godlike for me. Does that? How do you explain golf to the children? I wouldn't. I mean, teaching golf here in Spain, which I've been so thrilled to be involved here for the last 30 years, you can imagine how many young children one sees, and I say, who's the best golfer in the world? Well, I suppose it's still Seve's. I said, well, show me Seve's swing. So they show me Seve's swing. I wouldn't dream of teaching children. Particularly these days, mind you, you're probably not as fortunate as we are in Britain or America, where we see so much golf on television. I would want children to make a hero of, I said Tom Watson. I mean, Tom probably for me is just as good a swinger today as ever. If it's Spain or Sweden, you know, make a hero of a good player and have them copy. And I know I used to have great fun teaching groups of children, which was tremendous fun for me, but I no more started teaching them, you know, all the intricacies. I would actually have a 9-iron in my hand, and I would be trying to hit them very nicely. And in the end, I would say, go on, you do what I'm doing. So teaching children, in the very beginning, young children, no, if you could have them copying something, I think that is very much better. But as I said, these days, children, what are children? You know, I see so many 14-year-olds here and at home that all look about 18, ever so strong, and whack it miles, and you teach them as if they're grown-ups, but so many of them have started correctly. You see, my generation, we fell into all sorts of funny ways of doing it, and the best players, the Lee Trevinos, if you like, the Freddie Couples, the Harry Bradshaws at home, they managed to get the club onto the ball correctly and make it repetitive. And I would say again, those driving ranges that I started to run in the 60s, where you collected the golf balls, it said the only object of the golf swing is to get the club to meet the ball correctly. How that is achieved is of no account as long as it can be made repetitive. Now, these days, we've moved on, but because most people read, hear, good tuition, start from the best starting position. In my day, God, no, people stood all over the place, but they managed to put the club on the ball. But teaching children, whatever you do, don't teach them through here. Let the monkey part take its part, you know, the imitative thing.
John, we know of your work with Jose Maria Olazabal, who's renowned as a wonderful iron player but a poor driver. How much of a concern is it when you're working with his technique to improve his driving that it'll upset the wonderful iron player that he already has?
You've put your finger right on it, in that people are always telling me what I should be telling him. But I would not want to upset his wonderful iron club player. Again, when I first met Chema, that would be when he was probably 13 or 14. And he did not, people would say, well, he obviously stood out. He didn't stand out at all, because there were a lot of other 14-year-olds that hit it ever so well. But sort of one year I went, they said, oh, by the way, you know, he won the British Boys' Championship. I said, oh, that's tremendous. And 2 years later, they said, by the way, you know, he won the British Youths this year. So then you know that you've got someone who has the other 50%. Winning the Masters this year, I think, was the greatest exhibition of self-control and courage under pressure, which is what it's all about at that level. And so I'm nervous. As a matter of fact, I think I'm losing the influence with him to some extent, and I think that is natural in that he hasn't had anybody else. He's had one of the pieces, one gentleman here this morning. It feels like the evening, doesn't it, with all these stars out, you know. Well, it's all right for you. I'm up here. There's the moon over there as well. But, now then, I think you would all that sounds as though you're all telling me to shut up. But one of the gentlemen, and I've forgotten his name, but he helped Chema a lot as a boy too. But I think in terms of when you keep saying the same thing all the time, it does lose its potency. Now, for me, he's not easy to teach. When you want something so badly, and I was as bad as anyone, I used to get very cross with myself, and I would take it out of other people. I can remember having to apologize to caddies occasionally because I'd behaved so badly because I was so furious with myself. But to me, he doesn't use the right driver, and I cannot persuade him to use a driver which would make life easier. In terms of when I taught him as a boy, he was totally orthodox. I don't remember him ever having to say anything to him other than, you've got it, just keep it there. Now, I lost him when he turned professional, as opposed to coming to Spain and seeing him every year as an amateur. And I didn't see him for 3 or 4 years, and it was Bernard Gallagher, captain, 6 years ago at the Belfry, when Chema was not playing very well. He said, look, you used to teach him. If he wanted you to go, would you go to the Belfry? I said, well, of course I would. And Chema said, yeah, I haven't seen John for years. And when I got there, I was appalled because he'd got the ball too far back in the stance. A 9-iron was on the ground a bit like a 7-iron, and he was most of the way to there. And then from here, and he was pretty horrible, quite honestly. So in minutes, we can come from there to there and get a different... He was sort of 70% better straight away. And I'm quite sure anybody here with any knowledge at all could have done that. But then, very fortunately, that was in September, I bumped into him in Spain, down here in February, and we had a good long session, and he won the Masters just a few weeks afterwards. But it's not me. He is the great player. He's the one who can do it under pressure. I have had the great joy of being asked for my opinion with ever so many great players of my generation and onwards. I don't make any claims to be responsible for their great success. They're people who have this gift of being able to play under pressure. One has been helpful, I think, on occasion, but I'm not someone, and haven't been for the last 20 years, who wants to give the continuity. Chema has it absolutely right for me. He knows that he sees me 3 or 4 times a year. John, I know exactly what you mean. I try and do it, and I'll see you in so and so. That's how we've been. But the last couple of times, he refuses to take the advice about the golf club. And in terms of his technique now, he's fine to hear, but there still does a little bit of this in the, that's from the years he did that. And his lesson, if you're interested, is your backswing's fine now, but please would you let the left hip clear out of the way. Now, in terms of letting the golf swing come from in, going back to in, the basic instruction was, please hit from the inside, clear the left side. But he can't do that. He keeps going like that. And so it's not good me persevering with that one because he can't do it. So I then chuck a peg tee on the ground over here and I say, although you're aiming there, would you please try and hit the ball straight over that peg tee? Now that takes me back to, if any of you read Ernest Jones' book, Swinging into Golf, written in 1930, what have you? And he taught the arc of the golf swing. You swing the club on the correct arc and the body will respond. That's just exactly the opposite. Now I use both of those, and I'm just explaining even with somebody of Lathabel's ability. If I cannot get them to move the body because the arc of the club won't let it, I'd say turn here and swing the club to the left on the follow through. In the 30s, 40s, 50s, most people came over the top. and pulled slice, not these last 20 years, not since Nicklaus has been the best. Square to square was written. More bad shots these days come from being too much underneath. A push fade, which goes an awful long way to the right because it hit right in the back, starts right going right. You need a lot of golf course with that one. At least this one, it started left before it went right. And so I spent a lot of my time. Well, again, you've got to have the ability to say things like that to the pupil, to make them understand. And if you get that, the first thing with a pupil is that you've got to make them hit better shots and quick, because they're not going to believe you if they don't. That doesn't mean to say you've changed it forever, but in the course of a handicapped golfer, in the course of 15 minutes, you've got to have them hitting some good shots. And then they'll believe you, and then you can stress, that means for you, you must at address remember that and that. From there on, all you have to do is, I can't tell you what it will be, and one of the joys of teaching golf is that you teach somebody here and you say exactly the opposite to that person there, and something in between to this person here, and you go down a line like that. Diagnosis, explanation, correction. Donato, God bless him, I think it's 2 years ago, I have done many of these type of demonstrations with a lot of pupils. And I've just taught a lot of pupils in front of young men who wanted to be good teachers. Our teachers in America, when I used to go over there a lot down the years, I would go down a line of 36 new pupils on a Monday morning of a new school. And there'd be half a dozen boys just following me. And I'd just walk in, walk in, walk in. And the easiest way to teach people how to teach, you cannot do it really without pupils. Because you're teaching people, but you're teaching people to put the club correctly on the ball, and the best possible way of doing that is to start from the right spot. Would somebody tell me if you've had enough of me? What's the timing like now? More? More? Finished. God bless you all. Thanks ever so much for putting up with me.